Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Going to cover a topic today that I don't normally get into. I generally sort of try to avoid hot button topics, at least outside of my personal focus of nutrition and health and that kind of thing. I generally don't get too heavy into real hot button topics, politics, which I have certainly plenty of opinions on. But and of course COVID, which is a super duper hot topic. But I'm going to get into that one a bit today because it impacts something that I'm doing that I think other people do feel strongly about, and I'll tie it in, and it has to do with censorship. It has to do with suppression of free speech, which I know is obviously a big topic on social media. In particular, and I just had something happen to me on Facebook, which has happened before, which is what I'm going to talk about just a little bit. I want to build up to this, and then we'll discuss this. Now, I am, as far as free speech, I'm something of a free speech absolutist. I feel, I know, frankly, I mean, I could say I feel, but I know, because history bears this out, that censorship is always a negative to a democracy. Always. Full stop. Any form of censorship in a democracy is ultimately a negative that has unforeseen consequences, that always, ends up going down a direction that is a negative. We could go talk about things like slippery slopes, and all that. But at the end of the day, as always, free speech, like I say, I am a bit of an absolutist in that department. I'm probably what they would call a small L libertarian. We can discuss the difference between a small L and a large L libertarian, yada, yada. But I'm going to try to stick to this topic. So COVID-wise, I'm going to small background story, then we'll get on to my main discussion of what happened to me recently as far as Facebook, going after one of my posts. So 2020, just as the whole COVID thing was starting to happen, in my normal fashion, I did kind of a deep dive, look into, where we were going, and to really discuss at length the whole discussion of what different countries. Now, I'm in the U.S., so obviously I was mostly concerned with the U.S. response to COVID at the time, 2020. So we're talking 4 years ago. But still, I was looking at the worldwide approach to how different countries were going to go about it, obviously with a sort of a focus on the benefits or lack thereof of lockdowns. And, I looked at the way other countries are going about it. I looked at some interviews and read some papers by highly qualified people as to what they thought was the best way to go about it. And we're talking about top level virologists and epidemiologists and all that. And the conclusion of a lot of them was, of course, that a wholesale lockdown of an entire population was not the correct route to go. Now, in retrospect, I think we know the answer to that. I'm gonna do my best not to say I told you so in one way or the other, because it's not going to change anybody's minds, of where you may fall watching this necessarily. I think, again, the data, I think, mostly speaks for itself. But what I wrote, and I'll show you what I wrote in a minute. I posted it to a Medium, and so what I wrote basically was that many of the top level people at the time concluded that a sort of wholesale lockdown could again have unforeseen consequences. I also talked about the Swiss model, as to what their approach was going to be. Hold on a second. I am going to, sorry. See, I know this is going to sound really, really bad, but I, like probably a lot of Americans, I have a difficult time differentiating between the Swiss and the Swedes. I know that sounds terrible, but anyway, and I'm not going to blame anybody by saying, calling me names over that. But I'm being honest with you. Anyway, but the Swedes, so the Swedes, as I'm assuming most of at the time took a very different approach. They did not go for the wholesale lockdowns, and they took a very different approach. And at the time, they were attacked mercilessly by everybody in the world that they were evil monsters. They didn't care about their population, so on and so on and so forth. Well, now, and I also knew that at the time, that when people were saying, well, look at their numbers, obviously they're doing it wrong, so on and so forth. I knew, as did other people at the time, that it would be years, 2, if not 3 years before, the dust settled and all the numbers were in as to how effective their approach was going to be or their approach was not going to be. Now, also just note that I wrote that article pre-vaccine. Now, that's a whole other topic, debatable, one way we can debate one way or the other. And I know people have very strong feelings on that as to, benefits or lack thereof of the vaccines and so forth. But I don't even think it changes anything in terms of response as far as lockdown responses and that kind of thing. So the article that I wrote, because, with the interviews I watched and papers I read and all that, strongly questioned what the value of wholesale lockdowns would be. Again, when you're doing things like a population-wide lockdowns, and where they didn't, now again, where the Swedes didn't, oh boy, yeah, I just did it again, didn't I? I said Swedes versus the Swiss. Anyway, now that we've had enough time to look back, you have to look at, and I mentioned this in the article, you had to look at things like all-cause mortality. What were the effect of locking down, an entire population, many of whom were perfectly healthy people, i.e. things like alcoholism, suicide rates, gaining weight. Boy, people gained a lot of weight in some countries in the U.S. I think the average weight gain in the U.S. was like 30 pounds. Wow. Missed things, missed cancers, because people weren't going to doctors. So you're talking about all-cause mortality rates, which did spike considerably after the lockdowns were over. Because there's always going to be a lag. Remember, when something is taking place, you don't have those numbers. You have to wait to get those numbers in to know what effect was taking place. And so, and people putting people out of work, homelessness. I mean, you have to look at a lot of variables, to know what are the net benefits of population-wide lockdowns versus, again, what some countries did better than others, which was really focusing on those that are at high risk from COVID. Old folks, aging populations, obviously hospitalized patients, that type of thing, and allowing the younger, healthier types to be exposed and experience what they called herd immunity and so forth. Which again, that was a big debate as to whether was there a value to getting it done with quickly, i.e. as oh god, I just hit the wrong button here. Sorry, folks. Anyway, so one country like say Sweden, which I believe is tied for or lowest all-cause mortality now that we're in. Remember, all cause is what matters, not death from COVID, but all cause, because dead is dead, right? So whether you died of, whether you died of a missed cancer, whether you died of, something else is obviously what really matters here, not necessarily COVID. So all cause is always going to matter more than just COVID. But their approach was to expose people, at least try to allow the healthier people who would probably be fine and just get it over with and just get it through the population as fast as they could, which means always means you're going to be a big sharp in infectious rates. You're going to see fairly high numbers in death rates, and then you're going to see a big drop versus kind of metering it out over a long period of time with lockdowns, which again comes with a lot of its own costs. Why am I talking about all this? Okay, so I put up this article that discusses this, questions the wisdom using very high level people and all that. And Facebook, they didn't remove it. I'll give them credit for that. They didn't just take it down, but they right away put a thing over it when you went to read it. False information. Let me. I'll bring you over to. Let's go to that guy. Okay, that one. No, that's lockdowns. Let's go there. Okay, so here's that was what you would see when you went to my page, on Facebook, and so they made sure that a layer of nonsense had to be gotten through, and so. So that's what you saw, and if you click through, then you'd finally get to my article on Medium and so forth. So that was my first experience with with being censored, with just blatant censorship. And okay, so what's my point before we get on to what recently happened? So in retrospect, I was right and they were wrong. That simple. Censoring that discussion, censoring that, if more people had been, able, I think, to, again, have that discussion. So, again, anyone that even questioned the wisdom of the sort of population-wide lockdowns was suppressed, banned, called a monster, false info. I don't think I didn't hear a lot of conspiracy. I don't think that one was necessarily considered a conspiracy type thing. But end of the day, those who did that came out well, or if not equal to, let's say worst case, a country or a state. Now, Florida, where I'm at, again, did not. I sort of like to call Florida the sorry, again, I'm about to say Swedes versus Swiss and Swiss versus Swedes because I really have a difficult with that. And I'm sorry if I'm not trying to offend anybody out there. This really is on me, being a Dumkopf. But anyway, I like to call Florida the Sweden of the U.S. in that Governor DeSantis did not go the radical, sort of went in that direction. Now, culturally, they couldn't be more opposites. But as far as their approach to COVID, Governor DeSantis decided at one point that he was not going to go let's say the New York City, California extremism of lockdowns and have a more modest, sort of moderate approach, i.e., focus on those people that are high risk, not put people out of work, and so on and so forth. And Florida, did well. It didn't do great. I mean, there's states that were better and worse, but I'm saying worst case scenario, when you compare, let's say, Florida, which I was close to the least lockdown state, to, let's say, the most lockdown state, you don't see a big difference in numbers. So worst case, people in Florida got to, we got to live our life a bit better and get outside and see other people, and were not worse off than the worst state, which I guess was New York, or was it California? So that's worst case. But if you look at like country to country, again, compared to some other European countries and so forth, you find that, again, they are ahead in all-cause mortality. Again, you're talking about, destroying your economy. You're talking about, again, kids not learning. You have to look at the big picture, not just who died of COVID and who didn't. Okay, let's get to modern reality here. So recently, now, if you don't know me necessarily, hopefully you know that I was, a well-known writer in many of the bodybuilding magazines, the print mags, pre-internet. Yes, there was a day when there was no internet. I've been traditionally published all over the world in many different languages and all that. But I also write fiction. And if you don't know that, well, you should, because, they get pretty good ratings. People seem to like them. I write thrillers. I write science fiction. I have one sort of fantasy sci-fi that's done really well. And recently, I just wrote my first historic fiction, which deals with a very serious, dark, difficult topic, which takes place in a Nazi labor camp. A lot of people don't even know, who haven't done their research, that the Nazis had different types of camps. Their main camps were labor camps, concentration camps, and just death camps, eradication camps. So this one takes place in a labor camp, and it deals with a very dark topic. It is a story of survival, and I wrote it because I'm a history nerd. I'm fascinated by this topic. I also wrote it because I know that, as time goes by, that the memory of what happened there is fading. I think that many people, unfortunately, really aren't. I mean, they know it happened. They know it's okay, X number dead, but you can't work with those kind of numbers without something, without something that kind of connects you to, whether it's a story of a particular person, whether you watch a documentary on a family who went through it or something. You don't get a real connection. You're unable to connect. That's just human nature. So I wrote this partially, again, as an attempt to use a single person who survives this experience, and she's a real person, by the way. I mean, it's loosely based on a real person, but her name was Helena Citronova, and she was a Polish Jew. And so it is loosely based on her, and it is very much anti-Nazi. Okay, it could not be any more anti-Nazi. So I put the possible cover of this fiction story, my thought, because I want it to be dramatic. I want it to grab people, So anyway, there is a on the cover, the possible cover of this book is a classic German Nazi symbol. You'll see it if you don't see it in the beginning of this video, it means they wouldn't let me, and they made me also take it down on YouTube. I don't know, but anyway, if you see it, you see what it is. It's a classic Nazi eagle symbol with a swastika underneath, and then the title. And the name of the story is called Helena's Hell. It should be out, I hope, in a few months. Anyway, so that got removed. It got points against me on Facebook for a hate symbol. So now, I had also heard, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but anyway, all the oppression and suppression and all that by all the social media, after the elections, also, after the COVID and stuff, the Facebook, I think, admitted to some being a little heavy-handed. They said, we're gonna try to do better. We're hiring more people, so on and so. Obviously with the exception of Twitter, now X, because that went back to being an open place where people can have free speech, plus and minus or whatever. But anyway, all the other ones, as far as I recall, admitted to being a bit heavy-handed and saying we're going to do better. We've hired more people. And all that. And I will tell you that not only has it not gotten worse, it's not gotten better, it's gotten worse. So I put up a picture of my book coming up, which hopefully you see. If you don't see it, I had to change it. If it's some mild thing, I had to change it. And said, it's been removed. It doesn't meet our community standards. And and I understand that I do understand that what happens with such a thing is that their AI logarithms, scan and they see it and boom, it just comes right off. I don't expect you. I mean, I totally understand they don't have 8 zillion people sitting there reading every post and to make a human. I get it comes up, it gets tagged, it gets pulled off. We can debate whether that's even a smart idea, but okay. What they used to do is when something like that happened, AI logarithm pulls it off, it would tell you why they took it off. You would if you wanted to challenge it, you could do that, and there would be a little box to write text and what your position was, and you could send that off. Now, that at least is probably going to a human being, I'm assuming. The human being can go check it out and they can make a decision. That used to work, for, I don't know, 50-50, whatever. I would usually get a reversal and say, okay, we read it, you're right, we're reversing it, it's back up. Now they don't even do that. Now it's just, there's no box to say anything. You're allowed to challenge it. There's some choices that come up, that just say, no, I disagree, it shouldn't be, it's too harsh. You check off a few boxes and then you send it on to them, and then I don't think any humans look at it. I assume yet again, an AI looks at it and says refuse. I assume that the refusals to reinstate probably are going to be, 100% now. So not only have they not gotten better about not being heavy-handed, they've gotten worse as far as I can tell. Okay, so, again, in context, this is a book. We don't ban books, because let me be straight here. I'm going to be very honest about this. The people that ban books are never the good guys. Never. Okay? So, historically speaking, banning books again, or banning again discussion about dark topics is it's whitewashing history. Avoiding talking about dark things in history is a negative to a democracy. It helps nobody. It just it pushes it down. There is an expression, of course. I hope everybody knows this, but if you don't, it's the truest thing you're ever going to hear. Those who do not know their history are bound to repeat it. So by not allowing me and other people to put up a book cover with a symbol on it that may offend somebody, may hurt somebody's feelings, may trigger them, quote unquote, that's my favorite, whatever, is not anywhere near as important as free speech, as discussing history, dark history, making people aware of it. So this is a really bad direction to go. Now, I know what some people may say to this. Well, hey, it's a private entity. They can do whatever they want. And this is true. And I agree with this. I have even said this on Facebook, where people have said, they took down my post and God damn it, free speech. Free speech does not really apply technically to private entities in the way that we think it is. Now, other people have pushed back and said, well, social media is really now the equivalent of like the public square where the public meets and talks, and it does apply. I can see the debates either way. At the end of the day, I still do land in that a private entity and a private corporation is not really under any legal or constitutional responsibility for free speech. And I know that's annoying. However, and this is a big one, we also learned that during COVID and during the elections and stuff, that the social media companies were in cahoots with the government. They were being talked to back and forth, told what to remove, or asked they'd like to remove. The FBI was involved and all that. So that is absolutely governmental oppression, governmental involvement. I believe it's illegal. I don't know the actual legality of it, but again, you can't have it. You can't have it both ways. Okay, either you're a separate private entity who's making its own policies, even though I think it's a big mistake, because all you're doing when you're whitewashing history and not allowing people to actually talk about dark things and all that, because again, it may hurt somebody's feelings, trigger somebody, whatever. But I would still say that's probably the correct route, but you can't have it both ways. So when you have the government, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the DOJ, or whatever, putting in their 2 cents about what you can discuss and what you can't discuss and so forth, well, now you are really going in a really bad direction. Now you are going in an Orwellian type direction, and that is a negative. That is a negative to a democracy. Full stop. Don't care who it triggers. Don't care whose feelings it hurts. Don't care. So that's what I have to say on the matter. That is my feeling, and my recent experience with, well, I don't think it's governmental, but anyway, with the fact that we are going down the wrong path in trying to, again, offend nobody, trigger nobody, anything like that, because we are using symbols, and symbols don't have any power. Symbols don't mean anything. Context is what matters. So if someone like myself is trying to put up, let's say I was a history professor and I, had just done a giant book on the evils of Nazis and so on and so forth, and put my book cover up and they took it down. Well, again, that is obviously a negative to free speech. That's a negative to democracy. That's a negative to preventing it from happening again, okay? Because the term never again, which hopefully people know regarding the Holocaust and so forth, the term never again unfortunately hasn't meant shit, because it has happened again. It has happened multiple times since then. It has happened all around the world. Another thing I will tell you is that no 4 words in all of human history have led to the death of more people than it can't happen here, okay? So just keep that in mind when you are agreeing with, a post being taken down or something like that. You say, well, we don't need to see that. And yeah, we do. Okay, we need to be reminded of that era and other eras if we don't want to repeat it over and over again. And trying to live in our little safety bubble will not prevent it. Okay? So that's all I have to say. This video, like it, subscribe to the channel. Obviously, it was brought to you by Alpha Joe. Coffee Booster, tastes good, feels good, it's good for you. I'll see you on the Brink Zone.